I thought I was going to tell you one story, but now I've decided to tell you another. So you'll get one. We started with the wind, and now there once was a dandelion. You know those fields, they're completely yellow and they're beautiful, and when the wind comes across them, it's like music. You almost see the music dancing. Well, these dandelions, they were all sort of strong and they were stretching towards the sun. They moved as the sun moved across the field. And there was one dandelion, extra tall. And she was so proud, and she would look across them all. And that head was full of ideas and full of little young ones, all sort of energetic. And she would sort of say, well, no, you have to do and this and that. And she knew everything that they would have to learn, and she tried to pass it on. But there was one little, what would you call it? One little seed, which knew its own way. Maybe you know that feeling. It knew exactly how it wanted to be. And as the yellow head changed to white, it stretched even faster and further than all the others. And it said, hey, wind, take me away. I've been, there's a spell that's been on me. And that spell has made me hold on to this wicked person down there. And I should be out there in the world, flying around and learning all the lovely things, not from you. And a wind, a little sort of coy wind, blew around and lifted up that little seed into the wind. And up and down and round that little seed went with the wind. And and she was so wild about that feeling. Here, there, and everywhere that seed just blew with the little wind. And they flew across a large stone rock, which was right at the end of the forest. And they looked down at it and they laughed. How foolish to stay there. Ha ha! Look at us, here we go. Woo! And the wind took that little seed and made it fly here, there, and everywhere, up and down. And the joy of being free was there in that seed. Well, you know what happens. This was the summertime. And in the summertime, the winds are warm, but sometimes they fill themselves and become stronger. And as they come towards the fall, they fill themselves with water. And every time there's a battle of winds, they grow. And that's what happened with the little coyish wind. He became stronger and stronger, and this little seed would sort of go, hey, well, how about me? I see you sort of filling yourself up with hot air, and they're going across there and fighting. What about me? What will happen if you suddenly go to sea and I'm stuck in one of the sails out at sea? Said the wind, you enjoy it, you like it, you come up and down here and there and everywhere, and I can see it on you. You enjoy the ride. And she goes, yeah, but... And inside that little seed, something started growing. A feeling of, there must be more. There must be more. And what happened was that at one point where the wind was just about to go out to sea, it came flying over the field at her home and right by the rock. And she released herself from the wind and fell onto that rock. And she stood there and expected to be noticed. But the rock said nothing. He was silent, quiet. And suddenly she thought, maybe I've done something wrong. Maybe I shouldn't have dropped onto the rock. I mean, she looked for the wind, but he was far gone. She could see the storms raging over the sea. And then she felt sorry for herself, and she started crying. And those tears, like magic, they woke up that rock. And the rock said, hey, I heard this morning the little birds were saying there's wind and frost in the air. Slip into that little crack to the right of you. She looked down and she said, "Who?" She said, "Yeah, let yourself slip into there. If the snow comes this morning, then you'll be safe." Well, she had no choice. If the storm was coming, where would she be? So she slipped into that little crack of the rock, and there she was. And it was warm. There was moss, and she felt good. And above her, the storms came. And then she heard nothing because the snow had covered the rock, and she fell asleep. And she slept snug in the moss until drip, drip, drops of water dripped on her head. And she tried to lift her head, but it dropped on the back of her head, and she was going, "What is this?" And then the sun came down, and she realized that spring had come, but she tried to look up, but she couldn't. And then she realized that she'd suddenly grown a head. And she thought, "Oh dear, I'm going to be just like my mother. Oh no, I tried so hard not to be just like my mother, and here I am." Oh, and she tried to lift her feet, but she couldn't. She was stuck. Oh, and slowly something happened, and she looked at herself and she realized that something green was growing to the left and to the right of her, and she suddenly could look up because her head stretched, and then she could hear buzzing. Oh, there was such a buzzing going on in her head, and she thought, "Oh no, I've got children. Not just a few of them. I've got a head full of children, and they're talking here, there, and everywhere, and they need me to be wise on their behalf." Woof! She grew out of the stone, and, well, the stone, he looked at her, and she said, "Oh, aren't you beautiful? Look at you. Look at those golden locks, left, right, and center in the wind, and there you are, following the sun in the morning until it goes down." And she said, "Yeah, well, it actually feels quite nice. I feel quite good." And she got used to them talking in her head, and she got used to telling them what to do and sharing the stories of where she'd been. Oh, she'd been here, there, and everywhere, and she'd been up and down, and they went, "Oh, so will we." And she went, "No. No, you will be sensible. You will go into that field and you will become dandelions." And she could feel that some of them didn't really think so. "You think?" they said. And suddenly she felt the wind, because sun up and sun down, well, sun up and sun down, and sun up and sun down, and all these things that she needed to do with all the voices in her head. She suddenly felt that she needed a change. And that wind suddenly reminded her of what she'd been and how free she'd been. And suddenly he was there, and she went, "Oh, there you are. Take me with you." She stretched, and she felt that she was locked. She couldn't go anywhere. She felt that pain made her stay. And he said, "Where have you been? You disappeared." And she said, "Well, where were you? You went." He said, "Well, look good. Thank you." And off he went. Whew, she could see the clouds and the winds and the storms building up again. Just at that moment when she realized that life was actually quite good. There she was. She had a head full of very wise children, and they would all go their own way. And the rock, he'd been good to her as well. Suddenly she heard a child say, oh, Mother, look, there's a dandelion." And the hand came so close, she thought, "Oh, I'm going to die." But the mother said, No, don't take it. Don't, let it be. Now just think how difficult it must be for a dandelion to grow in the middle of a rock. And they went, and they looked at it, and they nodded. That was a beautiful dandelion. And she thought within herself, well, if you think it's difficult to grow and become a beautiful flower in a rock, just think how impossible it is to become what you need to become in the wind. So, we've been in many places. We've been with women strong and wise, and men who became wiser. We've been with passion and dreams. We've been with all sorts of things. And I hope, as with stories, stories have the way of being given to you to give to others. And I hope you've enjoyed your tea and tales, and that you will let the stories move on from heart to heart. Thank you for today. I bring up. So, thank you, Pernille Stockflat, Kasper Sørensen, and I'm Laura Kamis. Thank you. Yes.